We're going to go over adding details to your model, your kits. Some kits like ours, they have details in them, but you can always put more details onto a model because the more detail everyone says, the more details, the better the model, the better the scene. You're creating a scene with each of your models, and the details are helping you do that. I've got a model here in front of me that I did. It's Acrylic tool, and I added a bunch of stuff, and it's kind of hard to see this, but I can probably get them a little close up. But you want to start creating little small scenes within your scene itself. So if you can get an idea on this back porch, you can see how we've added all the details and just one little man walking away, and I have a whole scene there in a very small scene in a very big scene. And then if we go around to the front by adding this forklift and a couple guys working in some tools, we've added a whole nother scene in this big scene. So in this one scene, I probably have 5 or 6 smaller scenes. Some are look active, and some are what we call static. So if you look on the back, we have a lot of crates and little garbage and stuff going around to add to that scene. So this is what we're talking about, adding things to the scene to make it even more than what you have. So I'm going to put this back here a second. And most models come through, and some of them have foundations and some of them don't. So the easiest way to add a little more detail to your scene or your building is to add a foundation to it. If you look on this little display we have on the left-hand side here, you see that we've added a small concrete foundation with a little window in it. That probably wouldn't been on a kit that you got, but you could add this, and it adds a lot more detail to your scene. Lights above the doors, we have put the little precast shepherd's crook lights in our kits, but you can also use different ones, but it adds a little more detail. One of the things I like to say is that when your details are light and feathery and you can see through them, they add a lot more detail because they're not hiding the other detail behind it. On this little display, we have signs on the wall. We have posters and things, and then some junk along an old hot water heater stacked out back. We have curtains. We have shades on the windows. You have a roof detail. I'll go through some of these pretty quick, and we'll make it a little easier for you to figure out how to do these. If you go into one of the box stores like Michael's or things like that, you're going to walk in and they have a whole big display of nothing but colored paper for the scrapbooking people. So if you're looking for colors for your shades, you can buy a sheet of each color. I like to use this bright yellow, this light green, and this dark green. You can see the 3 shades that I like to use for my shades, depending upon what color the building is, because I need that contrast of the shade. So if I have a green building, I'm not going to put a green shade in it. I'm going to put the bright yellow shade in it, and that's going to pop. It looks very bright here, but once you get it inside the building, it's going to tone it way down. So you don't want a dark color building with a dark color shade. It's not going to show. So you can get the colors you want, have a couple of the colors on hand, and then just cut them up in strips and paste them on from the back. I use regular old tacky glue, little bead on the top of the shade, and glue it in. Don't make all the shades at the same height unless you have some anal people in there that would go around and measure all the shades. You can have a couple crooked if you like, but try to put the shades at different heights. It adds a little more interest. The other thing you can put on some of your residential buildings is window curtains. And I like to use the window curtains. I don't know if you can see it on this one. You can see that we have right here, we have a curtain that's actually blowing out the window. And you got the open window. And to add that touch, if you make your window shades out of regular kitchen foil, you can see we have them pasted here on the back. You take your kitchen foil, if you look at it right here, you can see it's wrinkled, and what I've done is I've basically taken it flat and kind of squeezed it together and then pulled it back apart, like an accordion, and it puts some wrinkles in it. And then by priming it with a gray primer and then painting them white, I'll cut them into small strips like this, and then I'll paste them on the back, and I can make them curved, I can make them straight, and it gives you a texture to them like a hanging piece of cloth. So a real simple thing is a little piece of foil from the kitchen and painted and put in, and now what I've added is when I look through my windows, it looks like there's something inside the building. So you're adding more detail to the building by putting some shades in. Very simple to do, very inexpensive, and it adds a lot of detail to your building. So this is something you can do very easily. And it's kind of fun to do it. It makes it look kind of cool. You got an open window, they can blow out, as I said. But if you look on here, we have window shades. We put the green on the bottom and we put the white on the top, just to add a different contrast. The other thing is we do a lot of signs, and we're going to go over signs later, like signs that would be painted on the wall or cardboard signs. We'll go over a little bit how to do it later, but these are added to the wall to add more detail, more color, and it can tell you what the building does, a lot of things. Signs are great. My buildings, when I build them, until I put my signs and the coloration on, the buildings look kind of boring. And then I start adding my color and my emphasis on those types of things on the building. Signs are easy to come by. You can pick them up on the internet. I happen to have a couple when I give out things that have signs for windows, signs to go on the buildings. The only thing you want to make sure when you pick them up off the internet that they don't have watermarks on them. And the watermarks might be from the person that is advertising them. And sometimes you don't see them until you make them a little bit bigger. So you want to check and make sure if you're pulling them off the internet that they don't have watermarks or identification logos on the signs. The other thing is on your roofs. It's very interesting. We can do roofs in many different ways. And we're going to go over most of those roofs. We're going to do tar paper, we're going to do shingles, we're going to do standing seam roof. So we're going to go over those, how to do them. I'm just going to mention them now. This little detail part we happen to put on some shingles that look like slate. But remember, the roofs on your buildings are the things that people are going to see the most because they look down on your models most of the time. So they're going to see the roofs. So the more you can make your roofs interesting, the more you are. And this just happens to be a couple instances where we've made different color tar paper roofs, and we've added some battens, and we've added some corrugated metal and torn pieces with shingles. This just adds the detail to the roof, so you're not looking at a plain, almost plain black roof or something that just kind of is plain. So you want to add the detail to the roofs. I mean, if you have chimneys and you have stacks and you have things like that, you're going to add so much detail to the building. Detail parts, I'm going to go over a little bit too. Excuse me here, but I'm not doing it.
Jack, we have a question from Jordan.
We can do that.
He would like to know, do you add signs and other details before assembly or after?
If I'm doing a big sign on a wall, maybe a one that I'm going to use, a technique I use with tissue paper. I'll talk about this later. I like to do it sometimes when it's flat. That's before I assemble the 4 walls. I'm going to paint most of my walls before I put them together, especially if I want to paint my corner boards a different color. I like to paint my walls, and I'll paint my corner boards and put my corner boards on, and then I'll put my walls together. So it's sometimes easy to work on your signs when the wall is flat. Not all the time, but most of the time that's the way I do it. And then sometimes I'll get the building put together and say, oh, this spot here just screams for a sign. So I'll need to put a sign on later. You can do it, but it's much easier to do it when it's flat. And you're going to weather a little bit over it, so you might do a little bit over it later. So if you're using paper signs, and if you're pulling them off the internet, you want to make sure you seal them because the ink will run. And I'll talk about that later on too. The other quick little easy thing you can find around a ways, is these are newspapers. So they can be spread around on the ground or in the gutter or in between. Kind of think about your newspapers, the light piece of paper they blow around. Look at the places that might look like they would get caught. And that's where you want to stick them. So the best thing to do is cut them out, soak them in some 50 white glue and water, and they now become pliable. You can scrunch them up. and the glue and the water will stick them down wherever you put them. So you can make these around. You put them in the gutter, you put them against the building, against the foundation, and it's just a little more clutter. So that makes it really, really easy. If you're doing detail parts, and I'll go over this later too, if you're going to paint them, the easiest way to paint them is to stick them on. These are tongue depressors. You can buy these at any of the big box stores like Michael's or things like that. I don't know what you have in your area. Michael's or even some of the dollar stores, you can pick them up. And it allows me to hold this and hold it in any direction I want, so I can paint it from either side. I use a little bit of tacky glue, put them on, and when I'm done, they'll pop right off when I'm done. And because I'm going to glue them down on the bottom, I'm never going to see the bottom, so I don't have to paint the bottom. I'll go over this painting them later, but this is just one to show you what I do. And I try, if I have them, to do more than one of the same piece. If I have 4 like this one, I'll put all 4 in the stick and do them all at once, because I have the same colors out, so it makes it so much easier and so much faster. If you're building buildings and you want to add something to it, that's the thing. Sometimes you want to add another wall or something like that. It can be stucco, it can be brick, depending on, or wood. If you need a substrate, there's a material called mat board, and it's basically what they use to mat pictures. Comes in different colors, comes in white. It's a strato board. It's kind of got some nice stiffness to it. Easy to cut. It's really great to add extra buildings. It takes paint and adhesive quite well. I make most of my stucco buildings out of this mat board. If you're lucky, take a trip down to one of the sign shops and ask them what they do with their cutouts. If they're really, not into a lot of recycling and stuff, sometimes they'll give you a big chunk, a big stack of it, and they're usually big enough for what you need to use them for. And you'll have all the mat board you can use. So it works really well for making these smaller buildings. Stucco, brick. Don't be afraid to experiment and add something to the building. I'm going to show you something we did here. This is the REA at Cranberry Yard. I went a little bit farther because I wanted to make it a train depot, and I added a steeple to the middle of the building. Now it's the same building, but it adds a little bit of different, and it gives you a steeple. Now I have a depot instead of the shipping facility. Now it becomes a people person type of thing, and it's very simple to make these and change over the design, so it makes the design a little different. Very simple to do, very easy to do. And we have any more questions, Len?
Currently, we do not.
Oh, that's okay. Let's see what we can do here. We had a question before. I heard somebody talking about how they were doing brick coloring. So I can.
Yes. We had a question, I believe, from Jordan, possibly, about the brickwork on the J-bombs, actually.
Okay, I have a piece of the J-bomb right here that I did. I'm going to go over this quick, and we'll do it. I'll do this later as a part. But we have a couple of minutes here. We can do it. Here's one of the side walls from the J-bomb, and if you look at it, this is the plain material. And what I've done then is I've painted with this orange paint, which is basically a acrylic paint. I do it this way so you can see the difference. And then I'll take a brownish paint and I'll kind of go randomly and color a couple of bricks here and there. So it's completely random. And then I need some kind of mortar. And what I've been using for mortar is what they call like a one-time spackle. It's an acrylic spackle. And if you buy this one from the dollar store, it's only $1. You buy it from the big box stores, it's $5. What I found is the stuff from the dollar store doesn't dry out anywhere near as fast as the stuff from the big box stores. So for $1, you're better off to buy it there. And then just use your finger and you just mush it right in and rub it right in, and it goes into the cracks and into the mortar lines, and you keep wiping it off with your finger till you got all your mortar lines showing, and then with a little weathering, you can be all done with your mortaring and everything done. Real simple. It's not too messy. If you get it in the cracks, you can scrape it off with your tweezers. I use the edge of my tweezers to take the bit that kind of cakes up around the detail. So it's very simple to do, very fast. And then I do my weathering on top of that. I'll use ink and alcohol, or I'll use Hunterline, depending upon what color I'm looking for.
Okay, we've got a few questions. Pat would like you to talk a little bit about exposed tar paper details.
I'm going to go through that tar paper detail in a whole detail, but I'm going to show you how I do it. I had a question from a while ago that somebody, I just saw on the internet one time. He asked me how I did it, where the edges of the tar paper were dark and the middle was light. And I will go through that on a whole different thing, but I can tell you right now, it's the way we put the paint onto our tar paper, and the way I put the weathering onto the shingles. It's very simple to do. It's not artistic, it's very simple to do.
On a similar topic, Clark in Canada would also like to hear more about the painted corrugated paper. I also know you have a clinic on that, I believe, as well, correct?
Yes, corrugated metal. Yes, I'm going to do a clinic, and we're actually going to do some rusted corrugated metal right here. I'll show you how. This is not my technique, but it's one that I learned from someone else, and I'll give him credit at the time. I think it's very simple and easy to do, and I'll show you how to do to rust out some corrugated metal, or less rust corrugated metal. We can have really heavy, or we can have really light. And I'll show you the way we paint them and get them to look like corrugated metal.
Iron Dagger over on YouTube actually chimes in and says he has a bunch of acrylic paints and he wants to know if he can use those on his kits.
Acrylic paint is basically, I'm almost to the point where everything I use is acrylic paints. The only solvent paint I use now is mostly the stuff that comes out of the rattle cans. That's where I use my acrylic paints, believe it or not, because I find it's much easier. But if you look, I have mostly all the colors I need that I brought with me. Let me turn around so you can see. Every from metallic colors to dull colors to, you can even get bright colors if you want. So I work with acrylics, and the real, I think the plus of the acrylic paints is I can create washes, and I can create things like that where you can do it with your solvent paints, but to do that, I have to use those smelly, stinky solvents and do it in my spray booth, so it doesn't, I guess, just bother me.
James actually writes in with a topic that you and I were discussing yesterday. James says, I noticed the lamps for over the doors have a base at the wall they're going into. What is being used for that?
Unfortunately, at one time I would just cut small squares and punch a hole in it. Unfortunately, I have a little bit of advantage on most people, because I have some people here that will cut me my circles with holes in it. But you can use a piece of plain old, I used to use a piece of the tar paper material you use that's pressure sensitive on the back. I would cut a square, put it on, I would paint it the same color as the lamp itself, the wire, and glue it right on the wall, and then I would punch my hole right through both that and the wall, or drill it through. Start it with a punch and then drill it all the way through, and then slide my lamp in, and it will look like a base for it.
Philip over on YouTube has a question, which honestly I would imagine a lot of guys question, but it really comes down to a personal, what you're modeling. His question is, I struggle with the history of roofing materials. I modeled 1914 and wonder what materials were most common then. How do you decide what is appropriate, and do you pick an error for your kits?
We pick more of a style of the kit that will cross the eras. I mean, most of our kits you could find somewhere in the back of a city that's not quite used as much because it's a little older architecture. But if you go back to the 40s and the 30s, they're going to be right up in there. But your roofing material, what we call tar paper, mostly what we use if we roll it out in long lines, was what they call roll roofing. Roll roofing is the same thing that shingles are made out of. It was probably more prevalent back before they had cut shingles, because it was easier to manufacture. Came in a roll 60 feet long. You'd roll it out, and it would stick down on the edge just like a shingle. But the thing that you want to remember, that roll roofing came in tan, black, red, and green, and that was the only colors that came in at the time. So those are the colors you're stuck with if you're doing roll roofing. And that's more common on roofs that are flatter pitch than they are on a steep where where shingles shed the water quicker and that you don't have standing water on it. So they would have had the low roofing. Standing seam roof, it's been around for a while, but probably not quite as long. It was much more expensive to do standing seam roof at the time. Now we have them, they roll them out in machines and they do it right on the site.
Now, I would also add that it also comes down to where you're modeling. As
Right.
much as time, error, a lot of those things that were used 50 years ago, you'll still see
Oh, yeah.
in New England now, or if you head south to Georgia and places like that, a lot of people are still using the same thing.
Yeah, you've got corrugated roofing material that's out there that'll last you 30 to 40, 50 years. So it's still going to be prevalent now for something if you're doing it in the 40s and the 50s. So roofing material spanned quite a bit of time. Cut shingles, tab shingles are probably 1950s and on because of the manufacturing processes. So.
Keith over on YouTube has a question about the acrylics. He loves the acrylic paints, but he has trouble getting good streaking. Acrylics give him a hard edge rather than an even fade. Do you find this problem? And if so, what is your solution?
What does he mean by he wants, I have to figure this out. Streaking means does he want to fade one color into another? Or does he want to if he's got that hard edge, if he wants to get rid of that hard edge, the easiest way to do it, believe it or not, is a little bit of alcohol on your brush. And if you wipe it along the edge, it's actually going to dissolve a little bit of that paint, and it's going to dissolve it into a wash, and it's going to soften that edge very, very nicely. It's going to actually melt the paint and create another wash and work it right into whatever you're painting. That will get rid of your hard edges. If you're doing if you want like a stipple, not a stipple effect, but a dry brush effect or a heavy dry brush effect, if you put the alcohol over the top of it, and sometimes that can be with ink or without ink, depending upon what you want to do, it will soften that edge of the paint. You're not going to have a direct edge. It's going to fade into whatever the next color is.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left. Let me see here. Anthony on Facebook was hoping that you could talk about the lighting base paper one more time.
The which paper?
The light base paper. What was that again that you said you like to use?
Well, if you're buying our kits or any kit, I guess, we give you a sheet of usually either pressure sensitive tar paper or pressure sensitive shingles. Around the border edge, there's a piece that's in one side is a little thicker than the other. You can actually cut a small square of that same paper, paint it. Before you cut it, it's easy to paint it. If you're going to paint it, I usually use a black color. I paint it black, and then I'll cut it out, and then usually I put it with a little bit of ACC behind it and glue it to the wall, and then with my punch, I'll punch a hole in the middle and then drill my hole through for my lamp to go through that hole. And that can be a square. If you have a paper punch, and you're in a lot of the larger scales, you can actually paper punch that out with a paper punch. I actually have a small paper punch that I can do the same thing. I can punch out a circle if I want of that same paper with the adhesive on the back, and I can create that backing for the lamp.
On the same topic of lamps, since we're back to that topic, what do you do when you want to add lights to when you want to light up your light shades? Like our light shades are one solid plastic piece.
Yep.
So how would you suggest tackling that?
If there's a couple of manufacturers out there you can buy that have all the shepherd's crooks all made up with LEDs. So you can go buy those if you want, and you're going to apply them the same thing, and then you're going to wire them from the inside of the building. So.
All right. I think it's about time for a break.
Okay.
And we'll be back in a few minutes.